No trucker hat today?
No trucker hat. I was really tempted to. I got a flat tire last night, and so this morning I've been scrambling, like getting car down to the shop and dealing with tire stuff. Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rapid Results with Andrew Weiss. We have the wonderful, incredible, amazing Heather Pearce Campbell today. And in case you don't know who this Heather person is, she is a warrior mama, nature lover, and dedicated attorney and legal coach for world-changing entrepreneurs. She's based in Seattle. She's the founder of Pearce Law PLLC, home to her legal practice. And she's the creator of the legal website Warrior, an online business that provides legal education and support to transform and inform entrepreneurs, coaches, online educators, speakers, and authors around the world. She hoards information, paper, and books while secretly dreaming of being a minimalist, and relishes an occasional rare night with her hubby when the kiddos are miraculously asleep and she can soak up HGTV without guilt. And last but not least, she's the host of the Guts, Grit, and Great Business podcast. Definitely check that out. Her website is legalwebsitewarrior.com. And we'll jump right in. Heather, tell us, what is the biggest and best business deal you are most proud of?
Oh, goodness. So we're just going to kick off with that one. Well, years ago, it was actually, I was doing real estate and business law at the time, and the market had tanked, right? And I've been practicing law long enough now. I've seen the market go through several really significant downturns. And this was at a time when a lot of real estate folks were really losing their hats, losing their shirts, because they were just overfinanced, and the banks were all calling the loans. And so there was one particular client where he was maybe a month away from having his a key piece of real estate that was also, cornerstone to a key business of his. The bank was calling the loan, and he'd had an attorney working for 2 years on this project, trying to get new financing in place, basically like hard money loan in place. And, the crazy part is that the attorney that he had been working with, like, I remember when we first met and talked about it, he was like, this guy was so connected. He went to school with George W. Bush and like all these credentials, right? Couldn't get the deal done. And I had 1 month until the deadline. And we not only got a new lender in place, there was a business partnership at the time that was really going sour. They had a third business partner involved who had been basically stealing money from the business for the past, number of years, embezzling, and then also not paying employment taxes. There was a restaurant side of the business. Yeah, it was a whole deal, and it was a mess. And so there was litigation going over that business dispute. And then this situation where the bank was calling, I think it was an $8 million loan, and they were about to lose the real estate, the business, everything. And in 1 month, and there was a whole team. This is the thing. There were law firms downtown Seattle dealing with this business dispute. They had over $100,000 in legal fees already incurred just on the business dispute side. And they could not get this third business partner extricated from the business. He was the one hanging up the process of, because nobody wants to touch a business when partners are fighting. You can't get new lending in place, even from a hard money lender, right? So I had a matter of days to figure out how to get this third really scuzzy business partner out of there. And we did it just through a talk strategy, a communication strategy. I just said, look, you need to fire your other attorneys. I'm not going to get involved in the business partnership piece. You need to go talk to this guy and say, look, here's what's going to happen if we don't get this resolved like now. Anyways, I won't tell the full backstory. It's a really interesting backstory, but he did it. He went and met with this business partner and the business partner's wife face to face. Next day, the other attorneys who'd been involved got a letter from him saying that he's willing to settle. No, he was demanding like another $60,000 or $70,000 from the two remaining business partners.
Wow.
So unethical. We got him extricated, totally settled, no money paid to him. And we got new loans in place on that property, new hard money lender, saved the business. And it was a cornerstone business of the town. I mean, it employed it was one of the biggest employers in that area. And so it ended up being a win-win-win from so many angles. And like all it takes is just thinking creatively about that problem. And attorneys had been involved for years and not solved either side of that problem. So that was one of my big, I felt really proud of that accomplishment. Because it was, and those are actually my favorite problems to solve, like really complex moving parts. Like things have to happen in a certain order in a certain way. And that was one of those examples.
I love that. When I think of a creative problem solving, I was at a program called the Young Entrepreneurs Business Week, and it's called the Oregon Business Academy now. And the speaker was Tyrone Poole. He created an app that helps homeless people find homes easier and better throughout cities. It's really cool.
Wow.
He's a rising entrepreneur, and he was talking about creative problem solving, how a truck had rammed itself into a bridge because it didn't know that it didn't meet the bridge height, essentially, and it was just like wedged into this bridge. And they're thinking about spending all these thousands of dollars. Like, do we need to dismantle the truck? Do we need to blow it up? Do we need to raise the bridge? Like, what are we going to do? And like, apparently one of the engineers in the project asked his 4-year-old son and was telling him about it. And like this, or the 6-year-old son. And he's like, Daddy, why don't you just deflate the tires? And that solved the problem right then and there, because it makes the truck shrink that much more to help that.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, and that's a classic example. I mean, even that kid example of getting outside of your box of training, right? Engineers are trained a certain way. They're going to be looking at and not that they're not great problem solvers, right? But so often when we train up in an industry, we limit ourselves because we're playing by a certain set of rules, and we tend not to look outside of those. We'll just call them frameworks, parameters, perspectives, right? And so I think my biggest joy in law actually comes from being somebody. I've always considered myself like an advisor versus strictly attorney. When somebody comes to me with a problem, there's another like really easy, clear example of this. I don't ask myself, how can I solve this within the context of the law? I ask myself, how can I help this client solve this? Period. Right? What are all the ways that we can look at solving this? And that's made for some really, really interesting solutions.
Yeah, and I do want to ask, like the fact that you were able to quote unquote outsmart sounds like dozens of attorneys over several months, over several years. I mean, that's so cool to have you come in and save the day. Like, how do you? Well, first, so with this guy's case, obviously there's the classic, carrot and a stick, and obviously people want money all the time. So can you give an example of how else you could have incentivized him to settle with no money when he wanted over 70 grand? I'm curious about that problem solving a little bit.
That's it. They had both been working with teams of attorneys who were tied into a litigation schedule where you just keep proceeding down the line and doing things a certain way. And nobody had said to this client, you can solve this problem. Like, put the attorneys aside, you guys can get together and solve this problem. And I think one thing that I'm particularly good at and that I pay attention to over the years is human nature. I also, whether it makes sense or not, I also consider myself pretty intuitive, meaning that one of the processes that I go through with every client involved in a dispute is a little bit of like psychographic profiling of the other party. What do you know about them? How have they behaved in the past? What were their triggers? And figuring out strategically what they're likely to do in response to a certain new set of issues or feedback or leverage that we create, right? So that's always a part of that dispute resolution process for me. But I like to utilize it in a way of like, what is the fastest path to resolution? Because I have a personality that's really frustrated when things take too long to resolve. Like, I'm like, let's just get to the solution, And so I'm a little bit of from a personality assessment standpoint, like an optimizer, a systems thinker, like what's the creative path that's also the fastest? Because all of my clients are small businesses. Nobody has money to waste. Nobody has time to waste. And a huge part of getting involved in the litigation process in the US is you end up wasting money and time. And that's just the reality of it. Even though it's a quote unquote Like, I think it's supposed to be the best legal system in the world as far as reaching a point of justice, but people are worn out by the end, And so for me, it is, I mean, and you said it, leverage, like creating both a carrot and a stick. And often what I find, especially around the psychographics work, and I don't know even if that's a term, but it's like psychologically profiling somebody on the other side to the best that you can, is that a lot of bullies and a lot of people with, I'll just say it, personality disorders and toxic personalities end up inside our legal system because
Wow.
they are unreasonable. They are the ones that are willing to push everybody else to the edge in order to get what they want.
Hmm.
And so when you understand a bully mindset, there are things that you can do and buttons that you can push to get them back into more reasonable thinking. And so it's a bit of that kind of work, and it's a little not necessarily predictive, but it's a lot of guesswork around here's what we think is going to happen if we do this strategy versus that strategy.
I would, if you don't mind, I would love like an example. Like, how do you bring a bully back down to earth? I feel like that's
Totally.
an age-old question.
Right? It is a good question. It is about understanding that particular person and their unique leverage point. So in this circumstance, you had a bully on the other side who was completely unethical, willing to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from his business partners, not pay taxes. So then there were also, by that time, penalties and fees also probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to the IRS for unpaid employment taxes. And he's wanting more, and he's lying to the courts, saying, because on the what he was doing on the other side of his life is he was also a restaurant owner, separate and apart from the partnership, and he was in the process of trying to sell his restaurant in the midst of this litigation, right? Well, he's making certain representations to potential buyers who were coming to look at this restaurant around cash flow, how flush it was, how well they're doing, blah, blah, blah. And then over here to the court, he's saying, we're in poverty. I can't put shoes on my kids' feet. Like,
Yeah,
there's a big
yeah.
difference in those
Mhm.
stories. And so, anyways, putting that information in front of him, like, look, we've got somebody with a written statement saying this is what you told them when you were talking about your business and offering it for sale. It's very, very different than what you are swearing to the court over here. And if you proceed down this route, I mean, this is the leverage point. We will have to put PIs that follow your family around because you're making up lies about you guys can't afford things and your kids are driving all over town. They have shoes on their feet, like they are not in poverty, right? And he realized in a hurry he was being caught in a big tub of lies that he'd
Mhm.
created for himself, and that those were going to come out. And in a community, this stuff matters, right? So I think that it was, and having like his business partner say this to his face, like, look, you're giving us no other option other than to disclose all of these lies. So you'll get to live with that. And that's a pretty significant consequence. Big enough, he was willing to walk away from all of his threats and his demands for money. And so that is that piece of like understanding there's still a human involved. They do have pressure points, but it's about getting it in their face so that they realize they can't keep acting like a bully without consequence.
Interesting. And so I love that. Just like being able to learn there's usually multiple sides to the equation, lots of layers going on.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's I was watching the show Ballers with Rock Johnson, doing the Rock Johnson last night. It was like this high school quarterback who's trying to pretend like he's all innocent, but he's also driving a $150,000 car, which when it wasn't legal to be paid in the NCAA yet. And so it's just
Wow.
like that's so interesting. It just sounds like these quote unquote bullies are usually one extra step of research away from figuring out what's really going on to help get leverage. So that's interesting.
Well, bullies are used to getting their way because most people have a reasonableness mechanism that keeps them away from the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so they don't really want to engage. They don't really want to play that game, but sometimes you have no choice but to play that game and figure out what is this bully up to? What do they really want? What are they doing? Sometimes it's about just getting one over. Like, I know bullies who just believe it's a dog eat dog world. Like, this is just how you got to be, right? And so it's understanding the personality in the context of the conflict. Like, there was another example, and this is another really, really tricky case, years of attorneys being involved that could not solve it. And it involved a gentleman who was from the UK who had co-purchased property with his, I don't know if they were fiance, they were dating, right? So they both purchased property here in Seattle. And then the relationship broke apart, right? So it's actually called a meretricious relationship, where you're not married, but you've lived together for quite some time. You've acquired assets together. Their relationship was so burnt out, they just could not have a civil conversation. And I don't do, by the way, I don't do divorce work. I don't do family law. This is not my area. But this client showed up because I'd done other real estate stuff for her. And she was like, I need help. Like, we are stuck in this scenario. She had an offer on the house. She was the one that was still living in the house, and she had an offer on it, and he wasn't letting it go. And it was a good offer, and it was at a time in the market where they needed to sell, and they needed to be done with that, keeping their relationship in the state that it was. And they had 30 days. They had 30 days to resolve this really contentious situation between them and try to figure out ownership, how they were going to divvy up stuff, because they still had stuff in the house. And I basically sat back and realized, like, they're just caught in a conflict because it's emotions that are leaking out, right? But they're not bad people. Neither one of them is a bully. They're not trying to be unreasonable. And I literally just coached her. I said, look, you throw an attorney into the mix, it's going to blow up. This guy's dad was an attorney in the UK. Wow. So all we did in that scenario was, like, I coached her on communication. I helped her ghostwrite a few emails. It brought the tone down. Within weeks, they had a settlement amongst themselves, and then we had to negotiate with the buyers, which we did successfully. I drafted the paperwork from inside a hospital. My sister ended up in the hospital with a major back surgery, but we closed that deal in 30 days. Wow. They'd both hired attorneys and had been working through other attorneys for over a year, proceeding through litigation, trying to deal with this. So it's scenarios like that where the human side becomes much more important than the legal side. The legal side is a part of it, but it's really about solving a bigger problem.
That is very interesting. And I'm curious too, like, when you mentioned, oh yeah, I love solving problems quickly, I'm like, isn't that the opposite of what lawyers do?
Kind of. And yeah, you're right. It's a little bit of the irony of the industry, but I don't think it's because lawyers are bad people. And lawyers get a bad rap for sure, because they work within a system that is traditional, it's slow, it's expensive. It takes a lot of training to become a lawyer, and it takes a lot of skill to be a good one. So it's one of those kind of quagmires where it's a tricky problem to solve, right? How do you provide services more accessibly? How do you solve client problems in a way that actually has them feeling good about the legal system? And I don't think it's for lack of wanting to do it. I just think a lot of attorneys stay inside the box. Like, these are the rules. If you get engaged in litigation, this is how it proceeds. And it's a little bit like we just keep going down this road. And whenever I get brought in, and I've been brought into multiple of these scenarios where litigation is already underway, I'm not looking at the road of litigation. Like, that's a piece of it, but I'm looking like, is there a trail over here? Is there a loop-de-loop we can take over here that gets us to the end? I'm looking at much bigger picture, like, what are the contributing factors, and how do we start to move puzzle pieces around where we clear a different pathway? So for me, it's a good fit for my personality, and it's a fun challenge. And, I think some people within the industry are getting better at it, because I'm a believer that you bring your whole self to work. Mm-hmm. right? So I'm going to bring my intuitive self to work that just has a good sense of people. I'm going to bring my ability to problem solve and brainstorm outside of the legal framework also to work, right? I'm a really good creative, I can come up with a brainstorm of ideas in no time. And it's one of my favorite things to do. And so I have an easy way of being like, well, what about this? What about this? Have you looked at this? It's a little bit like looking at all sides of a, crazy Rubik's Cube. It just takes looking, just takes time to look and explore those other options. But it's, I think ultimately all of us who work in a services oriented field, we're problem solvers of some
Yeah.
kind. Right.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I just like to take that to the next level and see, how do we quickly get there? How do we make it as painless as possible for everybody?
Well, and I'm curious too, like as a business owner, like why would that benefit you to say, oh, we could solve this problem in a couple of hours versus, well, we should probably meet once a week for the next 10 weeks to figure out how to best help you. Like, because it seems like that's what most lawyers want to do because they charge by the hour and even if they don't spend a full hour. So I was curious about that angle too.
No, and it's a good question. I think part of it is that my personality loves novelty. And so for example, I got a referral one time. I could have turned it into a whole thing. I could have been like, yeah, pay me $3,000 and and for a small business, that's a chunk of change. We'll figure this out. No, I solved it in 15 minutes on the first phone call and didn't charge him. Right. Also, maybe not the best business decision, but guess what? He came back to me for a trademark. He came back to me for, business contracts, came back to me for another trademark.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you create, and then referrals from that. So his situation was also a business partner situation gone awry, and they were bumping up against a date where they were going to be administratively dissolved by the state anyways. And she was kind of incommunicado and kind of I'm just going to say personality disorder type of person, like really experiencing some problems. And of course, that means it brought problems into his life and into their situation as well. And I just said, don't deal with her. Don't like throw away everything that you guys created together. Don't bring that forward, because if her concern is the IP, like just don't use it. I had him lock it in a file, password protect it, give it to me, and delete everything off his system.
Wow.
And then he just waited for the state to administratively dissolve their business so that he didn't have to negotiate with her around, right? And most attorneys might be like, that's weird, because then you have a certain amount of liability that maybe carries forward. And it's like, no, it's the most practical solution from the standpoint of dealing with an imbalanced human, not having a huge budget to deal with this and just wanting a practical solution, right? So that's the kind of like, I don't think very many attorneys would just be like, well, let's look this up and see if it just can be administratively dissolved on its own. And he said to me, he's like, I have consulted with numerous other attorneys. It's been hanging over my head for a year. It's been so worrisome. Like, I cannot believe that you did this in 15 minutes on a first phone call. And for me, that was like, that's my ninja self. And I love bringing that ninja to work, because then guess what? He's going to talk to people about it, So that's the part that I also am a really strong believer. We have to build our businesses around our strengths. We just have to. That has to be the shining star of what we're doing, So, for me, that's a fun part. I love solving a problem in 15 minutes that could have taken 5 hours, because they still got the value and I'm going to get more clients.
No, I love that. It's the kind of the go giver philosophy in a way, right? The book by Bob Berg, for anyone who's read
I
that.
love Bob Berg. He came
Oh
on to
yes,
my podcast too.
no,
Yes.
yeah. So he was awesome. Yeah, so she hosts him in the show too. Well, and I definitely want to make sure we ask questions about legal support and businesses and stuff. And I know you love talking about this. It's not like you're an attorney or anything. But what do most people get wrong when it comes to general legal support for their small businesses or online businesses? I'm curious if you can talk about that.
Totally. Yeah, the list unfortunately is long with that. Mostly the first problem is not looking in the box, right? A lot of business owners think like, well, I don't have the budget, or I'm worried that it's going to be Pandora's box, so I'm not going to have a full assessment done. So one of the things that happens is they end up trying to cherry pick their needs, like, well, I think I need a trademark. Oh, I think I need this over here. And what they really need is the map. They need somebody sit down and go, here's the map for all of your business legal needs. Here's the order of priority. Here's how you can budget this over time. And then it's like you are thoughtfully and intentionally building out these supports that help your business grow, but in the right order. And a lot of people will get it wrong if they're left to their own devices.
Oh, and that makes a lot of sense. It's just if you don't know what you don't know, and if you're too afraid to look at what you don't know, you won't look in the first place. And so that makes sense. And I feel like that'd be helpful for anything in life ever. Just like what is
Right. Like,
yeah.
how many times have you tried to put together your own like nutritional or workout plan if you're not an expert in those areas, and then been like,
Yeah.
well, I didn't get the results. I wonder why, or like, put yourself on your own, medical care plan. Like, of course we don't do that. We have experts that we go to that say, well, comprehensively, especially if you're into like holistic health, let's look at the big picture. Are you getting your sleep? Like, how's your diet? Let's tackle the easy things first, or the things that are really foundational. And then we can move into some of the more specifics. But it's the same in business building. Building a good business, building a thriving business is really about doing the right things in the right order.
No, I love that. And are you able to give us a sneak peek of like what are some like the top priority things that all businesses should do? And maybe this is a
Totally.
similar but different question of like what are the biggest legal risks that people need to be aware of, kind of things. Maybe those are separate questions, but yeah, we can go with
Yeah,
that
no,
too.
they overlap, right?
Okay.
Because some of the biggest legal risks lead to what should be on your map.
Yeah.
And the first one surprises a lot of people, but form a legal entity.
Mm.
60% of small businesses in the US are still sole proprietors.
Oh,
And a
interesting.
lot of clients in even the online information space think like, oh, they have small business mindset, which means they keep themselves playing smaller than they should. And the biggest difference that actually going through the process of forming a legal entity, properly setting up your business, regardless of where you're based, and I'm talking to international folks too, you are telling your clients, your government, your court system, my business is over here. My personal life and assets are over here. They're separate. If you're a
Mhm.
sole proprietor, those things live in the same place, and you're hanging yourself out to dry if you cause any problems through your business, which, by the way, does happen. I mean, anybody who's listened to Brendan Burchard speak about putting on events early in his career and losing his shirt, getting sued by one of the volunteers and having to declare bankruptcy and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
If you'd been set up the right way, had a legal entity that contained that liability, and then had some basic but proper documentation for an event like that, full stop, you're covered,
Mm.
and then proper insurance. There's easy steps you can take. So it's just about, again, doing the right things in the right order, but people tend to skip it. They tend to think like, well, I'm just not big enough now, or I don't have the budget yet, or whatever. Like, stop it. You have to plan for where you're going, not for where you are. You cannot plan for your current budget, or you're just not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I guess selfishly, so I'm a single member LLC. Does that help
Mhm.
me a little bit more than being
It
a
does.
sole proprietor? Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of misinformation about single member LLCs, like, oh, well, you still have, liability. An LLC is a limited liability company. It limits your liability to what is inside of that company. So, for
Mhm.
example, let's pretend you go to set up your LLC and you fund it initially with $10,000. You put it in your business bank account. You use it to, for some of the initial setup costs. Maybe you pay your first independent contractor out of that money, whatever. Whatever money is sitting in that bank account and any other assets you've created in that limited liability company, that's where your liability is contained to. It doesn't bleed over into your personal real estate, your personal bank accounts, your spouse's bank accounts or retirement accounts. And that's another thing. If you're in a community property state, a lot of people don't realize they're putting their partner's assets on the line as well if they remain a sole proprietor.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that should be a wake-up call more than anything else.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can have an LLC, you can set it up the right way. Just make sure that you keep up with your corporate governance. And what that means is that you file your annual report each year. You don't let that slip off your radar, right? You keep your meeting minutes. When you make big financial decisions, you make hiring decisions, you make any decision that you say to yourself, if I had a partner in this business, I'd have to talk about this decision. You go put it down in meeting minutes and you track that stuff so that your accountant, your CPA knows what decisions were made when, and usually that's going to precede like a financial impact to the business, right? So just make sure that you're treating your business like a business. And then what happens is you protect having your corporate veil pierced. That's what happens when a court determines, if you get sued by a client or a creditor or somebody that says, well, this person says they have a business, they're not really treating it like a business. And you know that's true when somebody is commingling their personal and their business funds. They have just a personal account and they're using that to feed their business or vice versa. No, you set it up separately. You set up that business, you set up your business bank accounts, you keep your business documents together, right? You really treat it like a business. You've done what you can from a legal entity standpoint to protect yourself.
Well, and sorry if I'm asking a similar question again, but
Well,
for people who have business accounts versus personal accounts,
mm-hmm.
and I know like sometimes those bleed into each other a little bit, kind of thing. With LOCs, like can't can can they both, are both of those accounts liable even if there's bleeding involved, or how does that work?
Well, if there's commingling, so let's pretend that you start paying company debts on a personal card, or worse yet, you use a company card. You've got a credit card set up for your business and you use that to start doing your personal shopping,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's an example of commingling. Like, you're going to have to straighten that out with your bookkeeper to make sure that you correct that. But the biggest commingling that you see regularly with small businesses is not doing the complete setup for the business, where they continue to run their business out of their personal accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they just haven't fully separated. If you set up a business bank account, you've got a business credit card, your bookkeeping has just become a bazillion times easier because everything is run through your bank account. You know, if you make a distribution to yourself, you write a check or a transfer, you label it distribution. Maybe you put yourself on payroll, which should be everybody's goal within a pretty short period of time. Get yourself on a payroll system. Doesn't have to be a lot. Like, start with, you know, whatever your business is creating. The IRS, if you're going to do what's called an S corp election, which is where you get tax savings at a certain point of earnings. That's the cool part about creating an LLC, is it's got flexibility in the way that it's taxed. You can actually make an election be taxed like an S corp. You can actually be taxed like a C corp as well. And then you start having some bigger advantages from a tax strategy perspective. And once you get yourself on a payroll, right, then you start to benefit from some tax savings, because as an S corp, you can pay out a certain amount of the earnings as distributions, separate and apart from payroll. If you are an LLC that has not made an S corp election, all of the income you make in your LLC is called pass-through income. It passes through and you pay taxes basically on your 1040C, right? You report all that income and you must pay taxes that year on it. So it's you start to get into some tax advantages. But if you're earning enough for it to make sense to make that S corp election, do it and put yourself on payroll, and you start to benefit from some of the tax savings. So LLCs are cool in that way, that they're easier to manage and you have good flexibility.
No, it makes a lot of sense, because it's I know we're in the gig economy where everyone wants to start their own business and own side hustles and side incomes all the time, and so it's like, oh, I could be paid a few $100s from my Venmo here and there, but I know that now the IRS passed that law, like more than $600 in Venmo gets taxed or something. So
totally, and you got to report it. Everybody needs to be issuing 1099s, and you can't skip the paperwork.
Yes.
So it's better to be more strategic about it on the front end and just take care of your business.
And have a good bookkeeper too, it sounds like, as well.
Totally.
Helpful as well.
Everybody, like, this is your key team. Even as a young business, I'm going to just list my favorite things. You need a business coach. You need a legal warrior on your team, an attorney of some kind who really understands your business, that is scrappy and effective and gets right to the point, right? Nobody needs to be wasting time. And then you need a financial advisor for sure, right? Separate and apart from a strategic CPA, and it's not CPA, or you need bookkeeping and you need a strategic CPA, right? So the bookkeeping is really about looking backwards. What happened? What do we need to document, etc. The CPA strategy piece is really about looking forward. Where are you going? Do we need to change your tax election status? Do we need to help you watch for opportunities to optimize your expenses this year because you made a lot of money last year and you're on trend to make more, whatever, right? But you need that strategy person that understands your business and understands where you're going and knows how to help you get there.
Love that. Business coach, financial
Mhm.
advisor, attorney, and CPA. Sounds
Mhm.
like.
Yep.
Okay,
And
very nice.
bookkeeping, by the way, I'm going to give you because I struggled. I'll just say that for years I struggled with finding bookkeeping that fit for me.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you have also had that struggle, I've had to fire multiple bookkeepers because they either weren't doing it the right way or it wasn't easy and it was more expensive than it should have been. It can be a little bit of a process because in the bookkeeping world, you kind of feel like, oh, it's a thing I don't really want to get into. So you want to hand it off. But truthfully, you have to understand enough about it to be able to strategically lead your business. You should understand it before you hand it off. Go to Wave Apps. It's a free, like blowing my mind. It's a free service. You've got upgrades, obviously, but it's a little bit like Zero or some of those other online apps. Wave tends to be my favorite because it's so straightforward. Automatically imports all your accounts. You can itemize your expenses. You can tag and flag easily. You can reconcile very quickly, and then just issue your reporting on a monthly or quarterly basis. It will just do all your reporting for you. So, and if you don't understand it, you can really easily hire a Wave advisor or somebody who understands Wave that can quickly get you reconciled and help you issue your reports. So super accessible, rocked my world, and has totally changed the way I do finances.
Oh, and I want to give a second shout out to that. I love Wave apps, and they've helped me with my taxes the past couple of years. I got bought by H&R Block on the tax side of things, and so I'm working on that transition. But the fact that, yeah, it's a free app, they can create invoices, checkout pages, and they're just
Yeah.
so small business friendly. It's definitely mind blowing. I agree.
They're
So thank you, Wave apps.
totally. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. Big shout out to Wave. I am not an affiliate,
I
not,
know.
they don't
Same.
sponsor my business, none of that. But the thing that I like about them is you can track your personal side and your business side. So I've got two different businesses set up and my personal side all inside of Wave. It's, anyways, they're great. If you are listening and you haven't found a solution, at least go check them out.
Oh, 100%. And
Yeah.
transition a little bit too. I mean, Heather, it's so cool how you're like the anti-stereotypical lawyer. Like they always have to wear suit and ties, watching the
Mm.
show Suits, like you said, cutthroat. But you're like, what's up, everybody? Let's go for a hike and let's fix your legal problems. What do you say? And so
Mm.
I'm curious too. And so going back to running a business and owning a successful business, obviously, I'm sure referrals and giving free advice here and there can only get you so far. And I know you have like a free monthly call that you offer, but tell us what else do you do to grow your business and get more clients and successfully run that?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the irony is when I built my first practice, my legal practice, right? I was straight out of law school when I launched my practice. I didn't know anybody. I had no connections in the legal field, and I really had no connections in Seattle either. And I built myself an Excel spreadsheet, and I just told myself I have to get in front of an attorney every day until I have more work than I know what to do with. Because I knew it was the worst time in 30 years to be graduating law school. And I knew work comes from people. Even in the down economy, there's work. It's just going to be different kind of work. So within a couple months, I had more work than I knew what to do with. And I had colleagues who had graduated law school with me and who had their job offers reneged, like taken back, like, nope, we'll pay you a little bit of money to go away. But there was a huge hiring moratorium. So it was a weird time to be getting out of law school. But people are what you need to build a business. Getting faced it. So that was the strategy that I used for my practice that always worked for me. And when I went to build my second business, the Legal Website Warrior, which is my online, legal support business, not a legal practice, but legal information and support business, run much more on automation and education. There was a little part of me that was kind of intimidated, like, what do I know about building an online business? Well, what I know is people, and I built it the same way, getting in front of people. So whether it's face-to-face, having conversations, speaking, I do a lot of speaking, a lot of educating. I care a lot about entrepreneurs getting the legal information that they need so that they don't have to fight against those big barriers to entry. And, I call it the legal black box. Like, I really want to break that legal black box open so that information is just more accessible. And I'm also a big believer you can help create the kind of clients that you want to show up and do work with you. So you give them the map and suddenly they're like, oh, I can make more strategic decisions. I know when I need Heather, right? And they'll come back to you. So it's a lot of planting seeds. And that's a piece of it that I enjoy. So speaking, lots of old-fashioned telephone calls, right? That's a huge part of my marketing plan. Not cold calls. No, outreach that the goal is to enroll somebody in a call. The goal is never to sell them legal services. Let's be clear. That is never my goal. It's to get to know them, get to know their business, have them feel like, they're a real person in my network and somebody that I care about. And that's all you got to do. Magic comes from that. New introductions come from that. I had a call yesterday with a guy that was so fun. And he was just like totally floored because he was like, I had no idea how this was going to go. And like, I probably made 3 or 4 new introductions for him. He made probably 4 new introductions for me. We've emailed like 4 times. Like, he's a person that I feel like I know a little bit now that is going to be and stay inside of my network. And for me, legal support is one of those services that people care a lot that they trust you, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like having a dentist in your mouth, right? I'm going to peel back the layers and look through your business and help you understand it. And people, I think, feel a certain amount of trepidation around like, oh, I haven't ever had somebody really look at this before. And I'm like, that's okay. We're all doing the best that we can at our own level of business. Like, I'm not here to beat anybody up. Let's just start where you are and map it from here.
No, I love that. It just goes back to, business. They try and say, oh, business isn't personal, but business is personal. it's
100% personal.
It's all, and even like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, like people are like, oh, it's all about the money, but like there's usually more than that going on. And so being able to leverage that. And so do you still keep an Excel spreadsheet of how you manage all your networks and Rolodexes?
I do actually. Yes.
Wow.
My assistant and I both help keep it. And then we also have another system for tracking how much direct outreach we do every day. But it's a huge part of it. Relationship building is just, I think, for any professional services provider, you have to prioritize that, and I don't do like BNIs and those kind of networking things because one, for the longest time, it was against the rules of professional conduct. I could not be a part of anything that had mandatory referrals built into the system. It's against my rules of professional conduct. So it was a clear no for me. So it's a lot of just showing up and speaking and giving and, and just making connections with real humans who I know at some point they'll have a need or they'll know somebody that has a need.
Interesting. No, I love that. Let's see. I have a few questions left here. You said I have to ask you about the funny story about litigation when you're being fresh out of law school, or be able to
right. Well, because we were talking about what's the difference between an attorney and a lawyer, right? And I think a lot of people think of lawyers as litigators, and attorneys can be just strictly transactional. And the UK has a different system where you've got solicitors versus litigators or something. I can't remember the terms, but definitely there are people who go to court and people who don't. So I never thought I would litigate. Like, that was not, I remember thinking like family law is not for me. Criminal law is not for me. Like, I think litigation is not for me. And then my 3rd year of law school, I had a colleague, like a classmate that signed me up for mock trial as his partner. Didn't talk to me, just put my name on the list as his partner for mock trial. And I didn't learn about it until the whole schedule had been published. So they take all the teams and then they do the mock trial schedule. And at first I was ticked. I was like, what? Anyways, I knew him, but not that well. And we'd certainly never talked about doing mock trial together. Well, suddenly I was on this team going through mock trial and we were winning. And we kept winning. And we ended up being one of the final 4 that flew to Washington, D.C. that year to go to nationals.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was super fun. And so we ended up at nationals, and this was actually right after 9/11 happened. So it was a really weird time to be in Washington, D.C. Like we saw the Pentagon halfway blown off. We went downtown and we couldn't get a tour of the Supreme Court because the FBI were on every corner. But anyways, what this meant is when I graduated, I had a very different perspective about litigation. And my first massive project ended up being a huge litigation project where my job was to manage 200,000 pages of documentation in the context of litigation. So the discovery, creating this massive library of resources and like knowing all the documentation inside and out. And it really has served me well. I ended up spending the first 10 years of my career in litigation. I know, like who knew? And it was one of the areas in law school that was like a definite no for me. So that's what is so funny about that story.
Yeah, my father's an entrepreneur, and just like he told himself, like during his whole college experience, like I never want to be a restaurant owner, I never want to go in the restaurant business. And then of course, sure enough, he got his start by owning some restaurants, and that's how he became got his first successful start. So
isn't that funny?
It's funny how destiny works sometimes.
Right? The universe has other plans for us.
Yes, oh, exactly. And speaking of other funny stories too, I'm curious about you becoming pen pals with your husband before meeting him in person. Like, tell us.
Oh my gosh,
how did that all come to be?
That is a funny story. So I was married once, went through a divorce, and then my sisters were like, "You really need to do online dating," and I was like, I was not, first of all, I've never been a dater, but I was not into even thinking about online dating. But I was so busy at the time because I had my legal career going and I worked downtown. And then I had this massive house project. I'd ripped apart a house because I was flipping it. And I was doing a lot of the work myself. And so my life was literally like go downtown, come home to my dogs, maybe go for a walk or a run, and then work on the house all night. And it was like a top to bottom remodel. And my sisters were like, that cannot be your life. And so I was like, all right. So they talked me into the online dating world. And anyways, so a little ways into that, my now husband and I crossed paths. It was on match.com. And we started talking. I think I sent him a wink. And then we kind of became pen pals where we didn't actually meet for a while. And I remember thinking, like, I'm a little nervous to meet
like
him.
physical paper? You mean just messaging?
No, just messaging. But it was old school email, right? Like you'd get a new email in your box, like ding ding,
That's still pretty old school. Okay.
It is, right? Like I still have the emails. We actually got them out recently because I was like, it would be funny to read what we wrote to each other, 13 years ago now or whatever. So we did that process for a while. And by the time we actually went to meet up in person. Part of it was the timing. It was like end of summer. We had lots of travel plans, both of us. I had work and projects. And then one of my dogs ate rat poison. And then I was tied up for a few days because he had to go to the hospital. And, life goes like that. So by the time we actually were going to meet up, I was pretty nervous. I was like, oh, what if he doesn't like me? Like, what if he doesn't want to date me and I still just want to be friends? But that's not really how it works. If you're on match.com, I don't think people are meeting up to be friends. So it was really funny, but part of our like pen pal experience, I don't know how it came up. We both found out that we are soap lovers, like nice soaps. And so Verbena, there's a certain brand, which it's a French brand, I can't think of it right now, that makes this really amazing verbena soap, and it's my favorite smell. And I had an extra bar in my house, so I picked it up, put it in my pocket, like it was a new bar, like wrapped and everything. But it's what I brought to our first date. I was like, and it was funny because it was the end of the night, and I like gave him a soap, like, nice to meet you. Here's your soap. It was funny, and now here we are. It apparently worked.
Oh, I'm glad it didn't turn into a soap opera. Yeah.
Right. Oh my goodness. I mean, I can't deny that there hasn't been a little bit of that, like every relationship, but
Of
no,
course.
it was good. And it's a funny story that we share now.
Oh, how special. I love it. Well, yeah, I'll make sure we'll wrap up here. Final few questions. One of those questions is, what do you believe are the non-negotiable actions as a business owner to be successful?
Oh, non-negotiables include a massive amount of personal leadership, personal growth, mindset work, being willing to make hard strategic decisions fast.
Ooh, I love that.
I call it fast ethical action. And in business, it's the same. Personal leadership is about fast ethical action. And I think it's the best journey for personal development.
Oh, 1,000% is. 1,000% is. Yes.
Mhm.
And I noticed that you want to offer people a freebie as well. So tell us about the Legal Basics Bootcamp.
Well, totally. And this will actually get back to, 'cause I realized we didn't walk through your question around what are the biggest legal risks, right?
Mm.
Legal risks are largely around the area of IP, not having proper contracts in place, exposing yourself all over online with your information, IP, your various assets, right? We talked a little bit about setting legal entities up the right way. My Legal Basics Bootcamp will actually walk you through my framework that I teach. It gives you the map. Like, here's what you need to look at, and here's what order in order to understand your legal needs and really take care of your business the right way. So it's a great resource. I've had people go through it multiple times because each time you go through, you're going to be like, oh, I'm ready for that one thing. And you go implement it, work on it. And then the next time around, something else is going to stand out to you and you'll be ready for that next step.
Oh, I love that. And for those listening too, if you go to Heather's website, legalwebsitewarrior.com, and do /legal basics bootcamp, you should be able to find it and give the map. Like she said, like how nice would it be to know what you need to know, when, how, and just like have it all laid out in front of you. That's incredible. Thank you for offering that.
And I should clarify, it's called boot camp. You guys, it's really not hard. It's not a boot camp. I should probably change the name. It's like a series of little short videos that again just help you analyze each piece of the map. But this is the same map that my higher level clients pay me, $3,000 to $5,000 to walk them through and do an assessment of their business in those areas. So it's the same. You can get it for free.
Wow. All right, there you go. Definitely check that out. Definitely want to save money where you can.
Totally.
And the last two questions, outside of going to legalwebsitewarrior.com, how do you want people to best contact you, reach out to you, connect with you? How do you want them to do that?
Totally. You can drop in my emails. I'm Heather at legalwebsitewarrior.com. I also have a podcast that I love. We don't talk about legal things there. It is all strictly business building, mindset work, both the personal and the business side of building a great business and a great life. And I have amazing guests. I mean, Andrew's one of them and a whole list of other folks. I think we're going well past 200 episodes by now. And so, come join us. It's called Guts, Grit, and Great Business. And I love spending time there.
All right. Thank you for that. And the final question is, what's the one takeaway you want someone to have from this interview today?
I really want it to, here's one of the biggest reasons that I love entrepreneurs is they've got so much gumption and I'll just call it elbow grease. Like, how many things have you already had to dig in and figure out about how to start and run a business, right? And people tend to lock themselves out from like figuring out the legal side. Just like you have to sort out enough to know how to master your sales, your marketing, your information technology, your business systems, right? You have to get enough of a glimpse into the legal world that you up level yourself as a leader of your own small business. And it's not that hard. You just have to connect with somebody like me that knows the right information to give you about your business, and you will up level in that area. And it will dramatically impact every other area of business. Legal is a system that underlies all your other systems.
Very well said, Heather. Very well said. Well, thank you again for coming on today and just doing nonstop golden nugget after piece of advice, after just with your helpful, amazing, wonderful spirit. We appreciate you coming on today. Definitely connect with Heather and get to know her because, as you can see, she's kind of awesome. And so thank you again for coming on today. And yeah, we'll see you all next week, everyone. See you later.